Breaking news. Good evening. We have an urgent report coming out from just outside of Los Santos. A man has found what he claims to be the world's first invisible bridge. This mythical object has baffled scientists around the world and puts into question the very nature of the laws of physics.
I just don't get it. I mean, it's a bridge, but it's invisible. Like, dude, that just shouldn't be possible.
But that's not all. Locals have reported other strange occurrences in the area, such as random floating bits of grass, and perhaps most disturbing of all, a hole in the ground that reveals the Earth to be hollow.
See, I told everyone it was hollow, but you didn't listen, did ya?
But the most disturbing scene came out of the local burger shop. A man was seen sat down, and I am not joking here, sat down on air, floating above his seat. I told you he would return. Repent, you sinners. Repent. Just what on earth is going on here? Find out more at 10. I'm going to split this production into 3 distinctly separate chapters. Chapter 1 will be the what, Chapter 2 will be the who, and Chapter 3 will be the how. So without further ado, let's begin. Chapter 1. What is the problem? GTA 3, GTA Vice City, and GTA San Andreas are games that all came out in the early 2000s and are credited with putting their creators, Rockstar Games, on the map. Now, I'm not going to insult your intelligence by even pretending that you may not have heard of this amazing trilogy, because to be honest, I can't think of a single person I know who hasn't played at least one of these titles. Well, except maybe my grandmother, but you know, I'll give her a pass. These games are cultural phenomenons that are constantly referenced and still played even decades after their release. However, like with most ancient games, they had one problem. They were ancient. I played the PC version of both Vice City and San Andreas just earlier this year, and encountered a ton of problems. Which shouldn't be too surprising considering they were intended to be played on Windows 2000 machines. The story wasn't too much better on consoles either, with them still having the 30 FPS cap they were shipped with, despite running on much more capable hardware. Truly, trying to play these classics was a royal pain in the arse. Enter the Definitive Edition. For years people had craved a remake, or at the very least, a remaster of this fantastic trilogy, and the Definitive Edition seemed to promise to do just that. The hype was high. The cash was paid. The game was installed. And then people actually played it. Now, I've been playing the San Andreas version of the Definitive Edition, courtesy of Game Pass of course, ever since it came out, and I have to say, in many ways, it is actually quite impressive. Seeing a game I grew up with have such amazing lighting, great skies, and updated building models is truly great. However, when you contrast that with its problems, needless to say, the bad really starts to outweigh the good. Bizarre bones, terrible models, strange glitches, a broken PC client, removal of tracks, inbuilt copyright infringement, an immersion-shattering view distance, and worst of all, a non-rotating burger. I mean, it is genuinely an achievement that it somehow managed to be rated lower than even Warcraft 3 Reforged. Yikes. The GTA Definitive Edition is, overall, terrible, and unworthy of the GTA name. But you know something? It would be really easy for me to make a half-an-hour-long production whereby I just show you bug after bug that I've managed to record, so we can all have one big laugh about it. But if there's one thing I despise about YouTube gaming today, it's just how predictable and repetitive it all is. You've all heard the story. A new game comes out and it's terrible, whereby everyone and their mum then jumps on the bandwagon to poo-poo it and repeat the exact same talking points over and over again, in order to maximise their own personal profits via advertisements. Developers who dare to deliver crap to their customers deserve such criticism, deserve to have their shoddy work laughed at, and ultimately deserve to have their reputation tarnished. However, in my experience, YouTubers are really good at pointing out what is bad, but are really terrible at pointing out why it's bad. We saw it with Mass Effect Andromeda, we saw it with Cyberpunk 2077, and now we're seeing it again with the GTA Definitive Edition. But frankly, this is all just surface level analysis. It doesn't exactly take a genius to buy a notoriously bad game, record some gameplay of it, and then edit in some lay funny maymays in there. It does, however, take some brains to actually look into companies, understand their corporate structures, understand basic business, and then backwards engineer theories as to why such a game was delivered in the state it's in the first place. Which brings us on to Chapter 2. Chapter 2. Who is to blame? When it comes to GTA, people tend to relate the brand to just one company, Rockstar Games. And on the surface, this makes complete sense. After all, Rockstar Games are the creators of the GTA franchise. There's a reason their logo appears whenever you load a GTA game up. This is their creation. However, as with many companies in the gaming industry, it just isn't that simple. The story of how the GTA Definitive Edition came to be is a story of three companies: Rockstar Games, Take-Two Interactive, and Grove Street Games. Now we all know who Rockstar Games are. As previously stated, they are the developers behind the GTA franchise. So who, exactly, are the other two companies? Well, let's start with Take-Two Interactive. Take-Two Interactive is one of the world's largest gaming companies in the world, with a market cap of over $20 billion. That's a lot of money. So you're probably thinking, well, hang on a minute, if this is one of the largest gaming companies on the planet, then why have I barely heard of them? And that would be a good question. Take-Two Interactive is not a game developer per se, as in they do not actually create anything themselves. They are what is known as a holding company. A holding company is essentially a fancy way of saying that they only exist to control other companies, kind of like an umbrella company of sorts. Essentially, they own businesses that make stuff without actually making anything themselves. Take-Two Interactive owns many subsidiaries, such as 2K, Ghost Story Games, Private Division, and of course, Rockstar Games. Indeed, contrary to popular belief, Rockstar Games, despite their phenomenal success, is not an independent company, but just a subsidiary of the Take-Two Interactive machine. Now, this often confuses people because Rockstar themselves also have many different subsidiary divisions themselves, but again, none of this really matters. All that matters when it comes to the corporate hierarchy of not just gaming companies, but any company, is who is at the top. And when it comes to both Rockstar Games and Take-Two Interactive, Rockstar is at the bottom. As is confirmed when you take a gander at their corporate page, whereby they state this themselves on numerous occasions: a wholly owned subsidiary. Though this isn't always the case, a good way to differentiate whether or not a company is a serious independent entity or just another subsidiary is whether or not they have a CEO. Take-Two Interactive of course has a CEO, a fellow by the name of Strauss Zelnick. Rockstar, on the other hand, only has a president, that being Sam Houser. Now you're probably thinking, well, who cares? President, CEO? Isn't that basically the same thing? But no, it absolutely is not. In business, CEO is a much more prestigious title than president. CEO, or Chief Executive Officer, is essentially the top dog of a corporation. They are the absolute highest position of authority, right at the top of the corporate hierarchy. Presidents, on the other hand, tend to simply be the head of a subsidiary brand that is owned by the actual corporation. So for example, the Xbox brand is owned by Microsoft. The CEO of Microsoft is Satya Nadella, and the head, or president of Xbox, is Phil Spencer. But though Phil Spencer is the technical president of Xbox, at the end of the day, because Microsoft owns Xbox, Satya Nadella is Phil Spencer's boss, and thus, really, the true head of Xbox. And this same logic applies to the relationship dynamic between Take-Two Interactive and Rockstar Games. So who, then, is Grove Street Games? Another subsidiary of Take-Two Interactive, or perhaps a subsidiary of the Rockstar brand? Well, surprisingly, no to both. Grove Street Games is actually a completely separate company that exists independently from the Take-Two umbrella. As such, they have their own CEO and are completely in charge of their own destiny. So then, what on earth do they have to do with GTA? Grove Street Games are the creators of the GTA Definitive Edition and are the ones responsible for its development. But the million-dollar question is, Why? Grove Street Games is a mobile game developer. I mean, if you look at their history, it's all just Android and iOS games. Not only that, but they only have like 20 employees, which might sound like a lot, but when you consider that Rockstar has over 2,000 employees, it really puts things into perspective. Take-Two, seeing the success of other companies when it comes to selling new and updated versions of their old games, wanted to get in on the action themselves by coming out with remasters of the older GTA games. But of course, someone actually has to make these remasters, as remember, Take-Two themselves make nothing. Take-Two Interactive's job is to simply generate cash for their shareholders and use their subsidiaries in any way they can to do so. Rockstar is by far Take-Two's most profitable studio, and as such, Rockstar's primary directive is, as it always has been, to make smash hit games. And right now, the smash hit game in development is of course the much awaited GTA 6. So naturally, it would make sense for Rockstar Games themselves to be tasked with updating their old gems into the modern era. But there's a problem. You see, the more people from Rockstar who would work on the GTA remasters, the less people who would be working on GTA 6. That is, of course, unless they hired more people. But hey, that costs money. Thus, I believe Take-Two Interactive asked themselves a question. What if we just outsourced all the work to a third-party company without sacrificing any of our internal affairs? And well, it seems that's exactly what they did. And it seems it went about as well as you'd expect. I see so many people blaming Rockstar Games for this disaster, but frankly, I don't understand why. The idea that Rockstar Games would seriously be cool with a mobile game studio pissing up their old games is an unbelievable proclamation. I mean, if you spent years making a masterpiece of a painting only for an amateur to come around years later and remake it, would you give it a thumbs up? No, you'd be livid. But Rockstar can't exactly just say no, as remember, they are a wholly owned subsidiary. If Take-Two wants to do something, Rockstar will deal with it, like it or not. One of the things that annoys me the most about this terrible trilogy of trash is that people are just blaming the wrong people for it. For example, let's visit the backside of the internet, Reddit, and see what people have to say. Rockstar should be ashamed of the GTA Trilogy remaster. 16.5k upvotes. Rockstar Games has legit destroyed their rep with the PC game community. 11.2k upvotes. So, I guess that means we can cross Rockstar off the ever-shrinking list of respectable AAA developers? 17.6k upvotes. This is a good one, get this. And before you get all up in arms about, oh, but they didn't make the remasters, the thing is, it doesn't matter. Oh! It was their IP. They chose to hand it off. They should be held at least partly responsible for the quality disaster. No, that's not how subsidiaries work. Honestly, I just can't believe how much misinformation and rage bait ends up getting on the front page of that absolute diarrhea of a website. Rockstar doesn't own the GTA franchise. They're a subsidiary. They have borderline no real power. I remember a few months back I made a video where I mentioned how the American games industry was in decline, and I mentioned how GTA was one of my favourite American games. I had a ton of people get on my ass and say, "Oi, GTA isn't American, Rockstar's British." And I was like, and? They're owned by Americans, and thus are ultimately an American company, like it or not. Which, believe me, I do not. I mean, look, I get it. The game uses the Rockstar branding, and on PC the launcher that you're forced to use is literally called the Rockstar Games launcher. But you have to understand that at the end of the day, that's all just branding. The same guys making GTA 6 aren't the same guys behind this, both on a development and corporate level. I don't blame Rockstar Games. Why would I? They've done bugger all. I don't even really blame Grove Street Games, as I think they were in way over their heads. Grove Street Games is made up of, mostly, amateurs. And I don't mean to be rude saying that, by the way. It's just a fact. To trust what are essentially a bunch of novice mobile game developers with 3 of the most beloved games ever made, I think is frankly an impossibly unfair task, especially when you consider the time constraints they were likely under. Everyone knows that not just games, but any kind of product tend to sell the most in the last quarter of the year. October November, and December. And the reason, of course, is, well, Christmas. Anyone with half a brain cell can tell you that this so-called definitive edition is clearly nowhere near finished, and needed another good few months in the oven. But doing so would likely delay the game into next year, where of course it would no longer be anywhere near as profitable. Considering just how common the mantra of release now, fix later has become in the gaming industry, it wouldn't shock me if Take-Two Interactive gave this release a thumbs up to stack up those Q4 numbers for their shareholders. The ultimate moral of this story is to be careful about who you blame for disasters, and even more so, be careful when buying a game that has Take-Two Interactive's fingerprints on it, as clearly, if what I've said here is true, then this release shows that they don't mind releasing something that's broken, so long as it will generate short-term cash. It's all fine and dandy to hide behind that beloved yellow R, but at the end of the day, the buck stops at you. But look, I get it. Regardless of whether it was Take-Two Interactive, Rockstar Games, or Grove Street Games, at the end of the day, you're still getting a crap product, and you're not happy about it, and you have every right to be angry. All I'm saying is, at least direct your anger to the right people. And just for the record, by redirect your anger, I don't mean doing what some cretins have been doing and harassing individual employees of Take-Two, Rockstar, and Grove Street Games on social media. That is completely unacceptable behaviour and only goes to perpetuate the mostly false myth that gamers are socially inept and can't conduct themselves properly. It's sad they even had to request people to stop doing this, as it shouldn't be happening in the first place. If you're pissed off with the state this game is in, then I totally get it, but ultimately, the way to show your disenfranchisement is not by acting like some sort of barbarian, but by forsaking these companies of the one thing they really care about: money. The ultimate protest against these games is either getting a refund, or even better, not buying them in the first place. And it's as simple as that. For Christ's sake, keep it classy. It's embarrassing to be seen with you. Which brings us finally to the conclusion. Chapter 3. How? It doesn't really matter anyway. I don't know about you, but I'm tired of re-releases, remasters, remakes all the damn time. And I had, and of course still have, absolutely zero intention to buy this trilogy, whether it gets fixed or not. And I'll tell you why. If you've already played a game before, and you buy a remastered version of it, the subconscious psychological reason why you're buying it is to attempt to relive some of the memories you had with it. I mean, Christ, when was the last time you bought a remaster of a game that you hated the original version of? Probably never. The GTA trilogy, to a lot of us, represents a much more simpler time. A time when life was easy. You'd go home, turn on the PS2 or the Xbox, and just mindlessly play these amazing games. Many people no doubt bought these remasters hoping to relive some of those bittersweet memories once more. But my friends, that is impossible. If there's something I've learned over the years, it's that replaying a game twice, even after many years, is never as good as when you played it the first time. And certainly, for games with as much nostalgia attached to them as these, borderline impossible to achieve. Even if these GTA remasters would have been absolutely perfect in every way, mark my words when I say, though people would of course be much less offended, ultimately, people would still not prefer them to the original versions. The truth is that games ultimately aren't about graphics, resolution, FPS, or any of that jazz. I mean, after all, we all played the original games on a crappy CRT TV at sub-HD resolution at a very unstable 30 frames a second. And guess what? We loved it. More pixels can't take the place of a fresh experience, and ultimately, that is really what everyone is craving. New memories, new stories, new missions, new characters, a new GTA. You think you want the past, but you don't really. Really, what you want is the future. You want GTA 6. Something new, something fresh, something you've never experienced before to rock your world, just as the trilogy did back in the day. So do yourself a favour. If you got this trilogy, get yourself a refund and don't look back, in more ways than one. The hell is GTA 6? You lazy bastards. Stop selling shark cards to kids. You greedy bastards. I just want a GTA game that's as good as the EOGs were. Just like Free, VC, SA. But you keep taking your time pulling stupid silly stunts like this. It's almost been a decade, will you hurry the forward? The hell is GTA 6? You lazy bastards. Stop selling shark cards to kids. You greedy bastards.